Hello, I'm Thomas Hare, Chief Content Officer of the Performance-Driven Marketing Institute, a not-for-profit trade association that serves companies in the performance and direct-to-consumer marketing world. Welcome to the third event in our summer seminar series, today created by the PDMI's E-Commerce Council, the FTC's E-Commerce Regulation Campaign. We welcome all of you to today's event, PDMI members and non-members alike. If you're not a PDMI member but are attending today, we'd love to have you consider joining the association. There's no better way to support the mission of the PDMI than joining and sharing your voice in the direction of this industry. In the handouts tab of your control panel, you'll find our PDMI membership brochure. I urge you to download it, flip through it, and contact any of our team members should you desire more information. One more housekeeping note, the group will be addressing any questions from the audience at the end of today's session, but you don't have to wait to ask them. Utilize the questions tab on your control panel to type and send your question in. We'll be collecting them and we'll try to get to as many as possible in the final moments of the webinar. Today, the E-Commerce Council welcomes members of the PDMI Government Affairs Council to take another look at the hottest regulatory story so far in 2023, the FTC's announcement of its intent to impose additional stringent restrictions on negative option marketing, online subscriptions, and more, and the PDMI's extensive response. The panel will also discuss the creating of the comment and dive into the FTC's latest regulatory efforts directed at e-commerce marketers, and there are plenty of those. Let's meet the group in alphabetical order. Linda Goldstein, partner at BakerHostetler. Jennifer Malloy, counsel at Venable LLP. Damon Wright, partner at Gordon Rees LLP, and our moderator and PDMI E-Commerce Council chair, Gregory Silvano, CEO at Bias. Thank you for all for joining us. Let's get started. Greg, take it away.
Thank you very much, Tom. So I'm going to start with a question to Linda, because Linda, you were on a panel that we had in May, where there was a lot of concern about the FTC's intentions related to the negative option rules. Comments have been submitted, right? Well, comments had to be submitted in June when we were talking in May, and we'll get to the comments in just a moment. But I'm going to ask this question first. Are you less concerned today than you were in May? Are you as concerned as you were in May, or are you more concerned today than you were in May when we last spoke?
I would say I'm as concerned, and I'm not doing that, to be neutral like Switzerland, but
be a lawyer.
A lot of what was, and I know we'll get into this, but a lot of what they've proposed in the new rule is just a rehash of positions they've been taking actually without statutory or rule authority for the last 5 years or so. So I don't expect their position on much of this to change dramatically.
Their position from May?
I remain equally concerned, I guess.
Okay, so when you say their position, you mean their position as it stood in May? You don't think the comments?
Yes.
May? Okay, got it. Jennifer, Damon, do you have any? You weren't there in May, but I'm going to assume you were concerned in May. Are you as concerned, less concerned? Have things changed dramatically since May, one way or the other?
I tend to agree with Linda. I remain as concerned. I think the FTC for a while has just been convinced that negative options are evil, and we're always trying to, people are trying to fool consumers, and no matter how detailed you get, it never seems to be enough for them. And I do think there's a percentage of consumers that are very well aware that they're signing up for a negative option and figure out, oh, I'll worry about it later. And then they complain and they write a letter to, the state AG or whatever. And but I don't think that's an argument the FTC is interested in hearing.
Okay. Damon, you have to give a far more sensational answer. You have to say you're not concerned at all or terribly concerned.
I was terribly concerned then. I'm terribly concerned now. There was Lena Khan testified before Congress in July and took a bit of a beating, largely focusing on antitrust issues, but there was some discussion of consumer protection issues. And I can't say I'm optimistic that that's going to cause the FTC to temper its aggressiveness.
Okay.
But maybe, the notion that we are going into court and losing cases that we think we might lose. I'm butchering your quote, but it's sort of that effect, because that helps to inform Congress about the need to give us more power, more resources. That sentiment didn't carry over very well with at least the Republicans in Congress. If you want us to give you more resources, more power, don't tell us that you're not using the resources we've already given you effectively. So maybe that will temper some of the FTC's aggressiveness, but probably not.
Okay. All right. So who would like to give just a 30-second, 60-second recap of what we're talking about? Because that question kind of leads to maybe you were there in May and you understood, this topic. But let's say somebody is watching right now and they're not fully informed, without turning this into a discussion about, the proposed changes, because that will take over an hour. Who could just give a quick recap of what this is all about?
So I'll go, Greg. So basically, what the FTC is doing, and they've done this in other areas as well, is this is a proposed rulemaking proceeding. It's not like a statute. For example, ROSCA, which currently governs negative option, is a statute that has to go through Congress and all of that. But the FTC has very broad, although not unbridled, rulemaking authority where they can pass trade regulation rules, and that's what this is. What's really bizarre about this one is they took a rule, an existing rule that was called the pre-notification negative option rule. Anyone on the call that's younger than me won't probably remember this, but that rule is designed to go after like the record clubs and then the CD clubs, where you would get the first year for $1 a record or whatever, and they'd send you the next selection unless you canceled. Very specific, very arcane type of negative option marketing that is hardly in use today. However, it's sitting there and was a very convenient vehicle for the FTC to say, we're going to take this rule and now we're going to apply it to something completely different. And really what's most concerning about this is, as many of you know, and I'm not going to get into this, but the FTC lost a lot of authority to get money after the Supreme Court ruled that they can't run into federal court and get money. A trade regulation rule like this is a vehicle for the FTC to get money. A violation of this rule, and there will be a rule, is upwards of $50,000 per violation. So it's basically a way for the FTC to essentially put all negative option marketing under the threat of very substantial penalties.
And there's even more to that, where even if, and I'm going to paraphrase, so correct me, even if you only have that option, negative, a subscription or something available on a website, everything about that website, everything about that brand, whatever the realm is there, goes under that scrutiny, correct?
Correct. So even if you do everything in terms of disclosing the details of the negative option and getting the necessary consents and providing an easy method of cancellation, if you make a false claim about a product, so for example, you're selling a supplement or a cosmetic on subscription, and you make a false product claim, that false product claim can now be prosecuted as a violation of this rule.
At $50,000 per.
Correct.
Even if it had nothing to do with the subscription, even if it had nothing to do with negative option, that particular instance, it's any efficacy claim.
Correct. And by the way, that is one of the reasons the FTC did this in an enforcement action against a company called MoviePass about 2 years ago. And that is one of the reasons Commissioner Wilson left. I mean, she thought that was such an overreach of the FTC's authority that she wrote a scathing dissent on this.
So let's get into the next step. So when we spoke in May, it was that comments, are welcomed, and I know that the PDMI officially submitted comments. Could somebody summarize, what was the PDMI's take? What was the general idea of the comments that were submitted?
I'll take that. I should say that Linda and BakerHostetler did a really phenomenal job preparing the comments. They're just so well done and clear and thoughtful, and well reasoned, and just really picking apart all the problems with the proposed rule. But sort of at a high level, PDMI is explaining that this proposed rule will add to the patchwork of federal law and state laws that already exist, creating more confusion for retailers, both small businesses, new businesses, and established businesses, and create confusion for consumers and ultimately not help consumers, that it's over-regulation. And then kind of getting more granular, it's over-regulation in several ways. There's this requirement that there be a separate consent to the subscription billing part of a transaction, separate from the remainder of the transaction. In other words, maybe like a double opt-in. But so often, the entire transaction is a subscription. It's the Book of the Month Club. It's not the buy one book or Book of the Month Club. So if you have a double opt-in for something where the entire transaction is subscription, that's just confusing. And it creates friction and confusion for consumers. Then there's the cancellation provisions that say that the cancellation must be as easy as the purchase transaction, but that's confusing because consumers make a lot of different decisions when they decide to purchase. They go through different flows. They decide what they want to buy, how they want to buy it, what price point, and the kind of an offshoot of that is that there should be a click to cancel. There must be a click to cancel ability for the consumer, but that doesn't provide the options that a consumer may want, like being able to pause their subscription. And we believe it will lead to accidental cancellation and the inability for merchants to confirm that the consumer is the person who actually completed the original transaction as opposed to someone else in their household or some other person. And then there are restrictions on save offers, that merchants are not allowed to really have dialogue with the consumer to describe the savings they can obtain or the product benefits, that if a consumer doesn't express an interest in hearing about an offer at the outset, the conversation must stop. But that doesn't give consumers enough information. It's very restrictive, doesn't reflect the kind of natural back and forth conversation that people have. And a lot of people like the option to be able to pause or skip or receive a discount once they learn more about the information. But overall, this is basically, as Linda said, it's an outgrowth reaction to the Supreme Court's decision in AMG Capital, the FTC trying to get more firepower. And it's also overly punitive and unfair in targeting subscription retailers, as opposed to businesses that are selling just a one-time purchase. It also doesn't take into account brick and mortar retailers like gyms.
Exactly. So this is offline as well, and this is B2B,
right.
In person. This is not strictly about e-commerce.
Correct. Yeah, the Electronic Transactions Association expressed concern that it could restrict B2B transactions, whether it's a payment processor and a merchant or any other kind of B2B transaction where contracts are negotiated by sophisticated businesses, and there's a provision that the contract will automatically renew. And
I would imagine they are less technically prepared for these types of changes than something like an e-commerce platform, right? I mean, that's another checkbox. It would hurt conversion rate, might cause confusion, things like that. I certainly understand it, but there are rules in place that in the online world we've been dealing with, right? So it's more unnecessary, understood. But I mean, if you're a gym, you might not have these kind of processes and training in place, I would imagine, to do something that could incur a $50,000 fine if you get it wrong.
Right.
If you think about some of the requirements, for example, that you have to disclose all the terms of the recurring charge, you have to disclose that immediately next to the consent. that requirement makes no sense in the context of a large B2B transaction, because the whole contract, the terms of the agreement are going to be set forth in the contract that undoubtedly the business is going to have their lawyer review. So it's a glaring example, in my view, of how the FTC, they look at something in the context of what they're used to seeing, which are online negative options where the terms have been buried. And then they come out with a rule that has all these ramifications that is probably unworkable, and bad for businesses, because it completely interferes with the terms of the contract they're trying to enter into with their customers.
Is it realistic to believe that what they're proposing was almost a knee-jerk reaction to the movie pass scenario, and it's so extreme that it just can't go through like this? I mean, did they go too far?
I think they did, and particularly, the different sales channels now, and the different customers, whether they're consumers, whether they're businesses, it's so different that the notion that you would have a one-size-fits-all approach when there are so many variations in this, it just doesn't make sense.
So we submitted the comments, obviously. You submitted the comments in June. Have you read the comments, the other comments that came through? Actually, Damon, you alluded to one. Anything surprise you, or anything that we hadn't really thought of, or you hadn't thought of, that came through in the comments that might be interesting?
Jennifer, do you want to take this?
I haven't read the other comments.
Okay. Well, I will say, yes, I thought that, again, the Electronic Transactions Association comments were well done, and explaining the business-to-business scenario that PDMI did not address in the same depth.
Mm-hmm.
I thought the Electronic Software Association comments were very informative, and that organization is really its members are the gaming industry, the video gaming industry, and the method of communication when you're a gamer and communicating with the platform is totally different than the brick and mortar face-to-face encounter, the mail, direct mail, and of course the traditional online website, right? And so I thought those comments were very instructive, and to the point that Linda just made about one size fits all, and how we're living in an incredible time of evolution and innovation. And so this one size fits all just doesn't fit. There are going to be lots of different ways that consumers are going to communicate with others. I think the concern overall is that it's one size fits all, and ROSCA really covers about 75–80% of the kind of commercial activity the FTC is really focusing on. And so why are they trying to take ROSCA and then add all these additional complications to it when there's this existing body of law that online merchants, at least most of them, understand and are able to follow? Let's take ROSCA perhaps and maybe broaden the scope of it a little bit to other types of transactions other than just online, but don't add all these other complications on top of it. That's going to hurt consumers and hurt business.
Is there a...
I was just going to say, I think this is especially difficult for small entrepreneurial, say, startup companies. I mean, they're going to have to comply with the same laws as, a publicly held company that it has a subscription business model. They don't have, I would say a lot of them don't even have the money to possibly comply and, have the sophistication to make the necessary changes perhaps to the website. And if they do wind up being fined, that's going to be a significant amount of money for them. So I think some of them may abandon the business model. And I think, it will kind of, increase prices as well for consumers.
Yeah, I bought my mom a subscription to a local florist delivering her flowers every other week. I know they are not complying with the law. Great people, beautiful flowers,
Yeah.
but it would come at great expense for them to have to meet these stringent standards, and it wouldn't help anyone.
Is there a buzz on the street now, like as of the end of August 2023 versus, April, May, when we last talked about this? Is there any change or increased chatter? I mean, do you feel more people are starting to tune into this and understand that it's real?
I don't know if there's so much chatter about this specific rule. There is a lot of chatter about just the avalanche of rulemaking activity that the FTC is engaged in. It's earnings claims. They're about to embark on a privacy rulemaking. They are very serious about rulemaking on fake reviews, fake consumer reviews. And so I think for most of us, we've never seen this level of rulemaking activity in recent history. And then when you look at that at a 40,000 foot level, you can really appreciate how the FTC has essentially built a strategy of working around the Supreme Court's decision in AMG, because they have incredible control over their rulemaking. So it's very difficult to persuade them off their positions. And then suddenly you'll have so many aspects of business being regulated by these rules and subject to these penalties.
All right, so we're gonna get into the other thing.
About that, for sure.
I'm sorry, say that again, Jennifer.
There's buzz about that for sure.
Okay. All right, so we're going to get into actually some of those other things in just a second. Damon, sorry, I just cut you off.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I don't think there is a tremendous amount of buzz about this proposed rule, because I think business people are feeling so overwhelmed that it's just information overload. Every couple of months, there's a new state law privacy statute. Washington State just passed this My Health, My Data law that sort of is trying to fill the gaps of HIPAA, and all across the country, Virginia, Vermont, it used to be California, but there's just so much that it's frankly hard for the lawyers to keep up, which means it's next to impossible for business owners to keep up. And I think we're approaching a point where some business owners are just sort of thinking, I'm just going to throw up my hands, because if I spend every single minute and dollar focusing on how to comply with every single law around the country, I won't be able to run my business and make money. And I'm going to do my best, but it's both FTC and state legislatures, I think, are really making it hard for innovation and business to succeed.
And I think to Linda's point earlier, I don't know that the vast majority of companies that have a negative option business model really understand that any false claim related to their product can now be prosecuted as a violation of this rule. So, as if you're selling a cosmetic and you say, my eyeliner is waterproof, and it's not waterproof, it turns out you can't substantiate that claim, then you can be prosecuted under this rule, which maybe people in the company aren't even going to associate with.
Because you have a subscription.
Correct.
Yep. So a couple more questions just to tie up the negative option side. Then I want to move to a couple of the others because I think they are super important. What is next? We submitted comments in June. Now what?
So, one of two things could happen. They could issue, they just weigh the comments and then come out and basically issue the rule. Sometimes if they're, the last time I think I saw this happen was with the telemarketing sales rule. There was such an uproar about the proposed rule that they came out and issued an amended rule that did address some of the issues.
What's the time frame of that? So if they implement it, how long until it's actually in place? And then how long did they let that happen before they made an amendment? Is it years?
I mean, most rulemakings take on average about 3 years. I mean, it's not a short process.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you don't know whether they'll be politically motivated to try to push some of these through in case, you know, in
Change
case something happens, you know, in the election. But that typically that's the, you know, that's the timeline.
Okay. Is there anything a PDMI member can do right now? Just sit and wait?
Well, look, I think PDMI members should really take a look at the rule and try to ensure that their business practices in general are consistent with the rule, because as I said at the beginning, this is the way the FTC has been interpreting the law, even without any rule or statute that says these are the requirements. So, and the FTC often likes to bring cases while it's simultaneously promulgating a rule to show the need for a rule. So it's likely they'll continue to be on the hunt for these cases. And they can still go under ROSCA and apply these same standards. So I think businesses should take a look at it and do an audit. You know, that's what a lot of our clients are doing. Just do an audit of current business practices, start to think about how they might implement some of the changes, which, you know, could be major operational changes, like, you know, as Damon mentioned, the double opt-out or the one click to cancel, which is, you know, the one piece I hope. I mean, there were a lot of comments on the proposal to not let you try to do a save a sale when someone's calling to cancel, and maybe they'll take a look at that. But I think businesses should at least be aware of what might be coming down the pike, because it will necessitate a lot of operational changes.
You know, and Greg, answering your question about what PDMI members can do, but maybe reframing the question, what can PDMI do? Yeah, I think it's such a powerful counterweight to over-aggressive, overzealous FTC activity. And as addressed in the comments submitted by PDMI, I could see a scenario, say 3-4 years from now, where the FTC has enacted this rule and is proceeding to enforce the rule, and there's going to be a challenge to the rulemaking process. And I think at that point in time, PDMI can serve an effective role in filing an amicus brief. You know, as addressed in the comments, one of the big arguments will be that with ROSCA, Congress did not tell the FTC that they could promulgate implementing regulations. ROSCA reflected a lot of deliberation and thought by Congress, and they said, this is the statute, and FTC, you're not supposed to implement regulations, but they're basically doing an end run around that here, trying to use the Magnuson-Moss rulemaking authority. So again, this is getting kind of in the weeds, but I could see a challenge to the rule that it wasn't proper because it's really just an expansion of ROSCA, and they don't have rulemaking authority to do that. And I think we could help to make that argument.
Great, thank you. Okay, so let's back up a second. Damon, you alluded to this earlier. The FTC has lost some big cases recently, right? Microsoft, Activision. Do you see those losses as emboldening them, or do you see it as weakening them? Is any impact whatsoever on this? Because that is a big change since May, right? They've had some very public misses, swings and misses. Does that? Yes. And they also had the FTC Oversight Committee meeting in July. Anything from those?
I think the FTC. I think Lena Khan should be doing some recalibration. The surveys of employees indicate that morale is low, and they're the antitrust decisions they've lost. They've also seen situations in the consumer protection context where the Department of Justice has declined to serve as counsel in litigation, and has said, no, we're not going to participate in this. FTC, if you want to pursue this, your attorneys are going to need to take the lead in the litigation. That happened in the Walmart case about a year or so ago. The FTC also, although it's still being litigated, they lost a motion to dismiss and had the claims narrowed in a data breach, not data breach, a data privacy case involving a company called Kachava that was been alleged to have facilitated surveillance of consumers and selling data about where consumers, what locations where they visited. And so I think that they are losing cases. And in a conversation I had with an FTC lawyer a few months ago, the lawyer made a comment very similar to the comment I probably misquoted, but basically was, we know we very likely could go into court and lose, but we're prepared to do that because we believe it helps the greater good to help to emphasize to Congress that we need more enforcement authority. So that's.
Oh, interesting. Okay, yeah, so it's losing to get more power.
Right, kind of coming back to the office and as a badge of honor saying, I lost, but we can use this for our PR purposes and our lobbying purposes to say, give us more power so we don't lose again. You know, I think, I don't think that's the right approach, but that's not for me to decide. But I think that they have lost, and they are, and of course with, you know, the Trump administration, there are certainly a lot more conservative judges on the bench too that might be more inclined to want to keep the FTC's legal interpretations and expansion of authority and power in check.
Okay. Anybody else add to that? The question was, did anything, you know, substantial come out of the fact that they lost some cases recently, and that there was an oversight FTC oversight committee meeting in July? Anything else to add to that before I move to the next question?
No, I would just add, I mean, I think as long as Lena Khan is there, I don't think we're going to see many changes. I mean, she, as Damon said, I mean, she was hit pretty hard in the oversight hearing, not just on her antitrust position, but alleged ethical issues. And, you know, their position is, if they would rather litigate and lose than settle a case on terms that they think set a bad precedent. And they're just very wedded to that position. I've seen them walk away from settlements that maybe got them 90% of what they want. But if there's a concern that it's not setting the right precedent in an area, whether it's privacy, negative option, whatever it is, they would rather go, and they've said this, we'd rather lose in court than voluntarily agree to settlement terms that we don't think are a good precedent for consumers.
Interesting. All right. So we have maybe another 10 minutes before we're going to open up the questions. So I want to pivot to something you alluded to, Linda, where they have a lot on their plate right now, right? So you mentioned, I just wrote them down, earnings claims, privacy rulemaking, and reviews and testimonials. I'd love to spend the most time on reviews and testimonials, but let's at least touch upon the other two. Earnings claims, what's going on there? Is that relevant to this at all?
So I mean, the earnings claims could be relevant certainly to certain segments of our membership, particularly like coaching, real estate, investment opportunities and things like that. And basically, the position that they're taking there is that if you basically have to give typical earnings claims, that you cannot, for example, have someone say, I made X amount of money in a year, if that's not typical of what most people using the program will make. I mean, that to me is the biggest source of tension. There's a lot else in there about how do you go about substantiating and particularly, you know, in the direct selling world, who, you know, what's the responsibility vis-a-vis distributors and all of that. But I think in terms of our membership, because this could affect claims in so many areas, and testimonials are a core element of so many of our members' advertising. If they proceed with the position that atypical claims are inherently deceptive, irrespective of the disclosure, that's going to have a chilling effect.
So results may vary. Not enough anymore.
Not at all. Right.
I mean, they've already said that, but you know, in the last iteration of the testimonial and endorsement guides, they've said that if you give an atypical result, you have to at least indicate what the typical result would be and be able to substantiate that. But you could do it in a disclaimer. This would take it a step further to say an individual testimonial cannot tout an atypical result. And that would be a huge shift.
Interesting. Okay. Privacy rulemaking. What's that about?
Well, you know, it's interesting because we don't really know where they're going to go with this. If you actually read what they wrote here, they don't actually use the word privacy. They talk about commercial surveillance. So my guess is that it's going to be a lot about the use of targeted and marketing and behavioral advertising, which they've been very focused on, and some of the commissioners think is inherently nefarious. I would not be surprised if they try to stick in AI in here, because they're all over it already. So those are just two thoughts I have.
Was that the one that talked about heat maps and being able to record a session through like a web tool to be able to replay a user session through a website? Was that this one, or am I thinking of something different?
So there's a lot of class actions currently, like an avalanche of class actions, alleging that those tools violate state privacy laws, particularly California and Florida. But so I don't know if that will make its way into this rulemaking, but I think we can certainly expect targeted advertising to be a big focus.
All right, so let's get to the one that personally I find the most horrifying, reviews and testimonials. So I wasn't personally horrified until I read some of it. Who wants to give a quick overview?
Well, I'll just say, I think the really significant change that marketers are going to have to deal with is the revision of the definition of clear and conspicuous for disclosures, and they now need to be, quote, unavoidable. And I think unavoidable means unavoidable. And I think, you know, we're going to have to see how they start, you know, enforcing that. But I think people should be looking over their marketing materials to make sure that their disclosures are unavoidable.
Anybody else?
Well, yeah, I think to Jennifer's point, that becomes a real challenge with space constraints, TikTok, Instagram, and such. You know, I think going back to the point that Linda made about typicality, we also have that issue with reviews and testimonials. And the FTC, I believe, would take the position now that if you are highlighting the positive reviews and positive testimonials on your site, that creates the impression that every single consumer has a positive experience. And it obviously has to do with what's the nature of the testimonial. Is it objectively measurable? Someone saying, I lost 3 pounds, I lost 9 pounds, or I made $1,000, I made 10,000. Could be something that's not objectively measurable, that's more in the nature of not fact, but opinion. But in any event, I think that's could be where we're headed. And I think that's overreach. Businesses shouldn't have to broadcast. We had 10 consumers who tell us they don't like us at all. every time they say we have 10 consumers who like us a lot.
Yeah.
I guarantee the FTC lawyers, if they were in private practice, didn't have on their law firm bio, here are the
We've
cases.
lost 10 cases. Yeah.
Right. So I think that's an overreach by the FTC. Again, it turns on the nature of the testimonial, but by and large, businesses should be able to brag about people that are satisfied with their products and services. That's just capitalism and fair and marketing.
So I'm going to read a blurb. This is where I got worried. It was one commenter asserted it is unreasonable to hold an advertiser liable for what endorsers say unless the endorser had a contractual relationship to the advertiser and the advertiser either failed to properly instruct the endorsers and take action when it became aware of failures to comply. Okay, so there's a commenter saying something happened and they failed to take action and or they failed to actually train the endorser, or two, instructed the endorsers to make a false claim. So that was the pushback on this. And the commission disagrees with both comments and expects advertisers to be responsible for and monitor the actions of their endorsers. So even if you found and corrected, you are still for even having it happen. Like that was the commission's position on that. And the other one,
Liability.
Yeah, it's prohibitive. And the other one was, for example, the advertiser could be held liable for disseminating a television ad, including an endorser making a truthful statement that reflects atypical results of using the product. Truthful, atypical. The fact that you have that in a TV commercial, even though it is entirely true, would fall into this. That is.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, the three basic requirements of advertising are that the advertising be truthful, that it not be misleading, and that it have substantiation. And it's that second prong where the FTC is saying it's misleading if it's not typical. And what they're often saying is, here's our net impression that we think the consumer's net impression is, and therefore we think this is misleading unless you disclose what's typical. We don't look at pharmaceutical drug ads, though, and think that the person flying a kite in the park and holding hands with their loved one walking down a sidewalk next to a pond, that is what will happen if I take this medication that's going to prevent my body breaking out in rashes. It's marketing.
Well, I think years ago, I mean, decade, it's probably more than a decade, at least maybe two, there was a Kentucky Fried Chicken commercial that was pulled. And it showed a guy sitting on the back of, I think, a pickup truck with like the big vat of Kentucky Fried Chicken. And his friend walks by and he's like, "Hey, Joe, you look good. You've been losing weight." And he's like, "Eating chicken." And the disclosure said, the average chicken breast has like 150 calories or whatever it is, which is accurate.
Yeah.
But it was the impression that was created that you're going to lose weight by eating this chicken. So I think, you can have every statement in your advertising can be true, but you can still create a misleading impression. That goes to the atypical results, right?
I mean, couldn't this destroy?
And the other thing I just want to mention.
You go.
Oh, sorry. No, I was going to say on the reviews in terms of, what might be a little earth-shattering is, and I think this is going to be really important to our members because so many of our members now rely on third parties to collect, aggregate, and verify consumer reviews and ratings. And really what the FTC is saying in the context of consumer reviews is what they've already said in the context of individual testimonials, that you as an advertiser are going to have to do due diligence if you want to work with one of these companies to know, how are they soliciting? Are they soliciting the reviews in a neutral way? Are they incentivizing those reviews, which would be a big problem? Are they suppressing reviews? Are they applying the same moderation to net positive and negative? These are all concepts that they've been floating about. And I think when this rule comes out, it's going to put a lot of the onus on the marketer to, sort of do due diligence on these companies who may not want to reveal exactly how they do everything. So, we'll see how that goes. But I think that they're going to take the position that if the reviews were not properly curated, monitored, moderated, whatever, that the advertiser is going to be responsible unless they really did some due diligence.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right.
Rick, one more thought on that.
Yeah, please.
One area that has me concerned is the scenario where there is someone who is an influencer or a popular celebrity, athlete, artist, and they are being compensated by a brand to promote that brand. But there are also organic social media posts that person could post, and it's Michael Jordan who happens to be wearing Nikes in an ad, or it's not my favorite golfer, but it's Phil Mickelson, and he happens to be wearing a shirt that says KPMG on on the corner. And that dividing line, but when is that influencer, that spokesperson, face of a brand, or maybe not even a major face of the brand, when are they promoting it and they have to disclose that there's a material connection, or when are they just living their life and they happen to be in a photo that they've posted, where there happen to be some insignia logo is being displayed? And I think that the FTC sort of says when a consumer would not naturally understand or reasonably understand, but I could see the FTC overreaching there and going after influencers who, in their mind, this is just me living my life. I'm not pitching anything in this post.
Well, what I was going to, and Tom, just so you know, I'm going to wrap up my side in a second. The line I was going to use earlier is, doesn't this blow, celebrity endorsements out of the water if the celebrity was a user of it? So, for example, I'm thinking Weight Watchers. A lot of times they'll have a celebrity person who has had success with Weight Watchers, and if that success is atypical, then it automatically falls into this bucket. Sounds like it. And the power of being able to use somebody like that kind of goes away, or the benefits of using somebody like that as a marketer.
Right.
Yeah. Wow.
The FTC would say we need a conspicuous disclosure about what is typical with data behind it. Although this person lost this many pounds over this many weeks, in a study we conducted over 10 weeks, the average person lost X, and that's very expensive.
Yeah, of course. All right, Tom, let's open up for questions.
All right, great stuff, everybody. Thank you. Really well done. Drew some interesting questions as well from the audience. First one, obviously, the FTC put this rulemaking into play to, in their eyes, protect consumers. Are there any large consumer groups lobbying, fighting, or driving this rulemaking change? And if so, what are the key elements inspiring their position?
Great question.
So for sure, the state attorneys general are very much in support of this, and I don't know. I would imagine. I don't remember if TINA, the Truth in Advertising, if they filed comments, but there are consumer watchdogs that have filed comments. But I really think what's driving this is the subscription industry has grown so exponentially, and there's so much money in that business. It's a good target for the FTC.
And California, at least, is one state that has had a task force, consisting of, I think it was 4 district attorneys, as well as the city of Santa Monica, that for years has been targeting negative option companies. And to settle has been requiring double check boxes.
Yeah. In the notice in the Federal Register concerning the proposed rule, the FTC discusses a California law professor. His name is Chris Hoofnagel. He's actually at Berkeley. And they kind of use, there's not a lot of discussion in the Federal Register about commenters saying why this is needed, but they do quote heavily from past comments by him about dark patterns and manipulative enrollment paths and such. But to your point, yeah, I think Tina did respond, and but there isn't. It doesn't seem like there are a lot of consumer groups that are out there clamoring for this.
Great. Next one. Of all of these FTC regulatory pushes against performance, D2C and e-commerce marketers, which one concerns you most and why?
I'll answer first. The reviews and testimonials, honestly. I mean, I get it. I understand just how massive the negative option thing is. To me, the reviews and testimonials gets down to, it's the marketing side of it. You won't have a visitor to the website if you can't use reviews and testimonials. You know, I forget the fact that they'll actually order something when they get there. I just feel like that reviews and testimonials cuts to the core of what good marketing is. I don't know, that's worrisome. It also upends a lot of influencers who are that's how they make their livelihood.
Right.
You know, there's a lot of people that it's a new economy out there, and you take every TikToker or Instagram person and say you can't really, everybody's too afraid to to use you anymore. It's not worth the risk. It's a big impact.
I think the FTC is also concerned that people, manipulating their reviews, but I think they've gone too far in the sense, I think if you were to show your reviews and rank them from like the most positive down to the most negative, their position is, well, people don't read through all the reviews, so they're not even going to see the negative ones. So that's an issue for them. And, at that point, you kind of throw up your hands going, if I put them all up and I try to rank them favorable to negative, like, why isn't that good enough? They're all there.
So I think for me, I mean, I agree. Obviously, the testimonials and endorsements are a big issue, but in terms of what scares me the most for our members, I actually think it is the negative option, not because of the negative option itself, but because of the provision that would allow them to use the rule to go after any misleading claims. And when you couple that with what the FTC just did in its new health guides, which say that, the requirements to have a double-blind, placebo-controlled clinical study no longer apply just to supplements, they apply to any product, including potentially a cosmetic product, that makes health-related claims. So when you put all of these pieces together, you now have the FTC just on its own coming out with guides as far, and really upping the ante on what will be considered adequate substantiation for health claims. And then, if you've got any continuity program of any free trial, anything with recurring billing, and you make a misstep on your claims, there you are.
And to Linda's point, I mean, I don't know that people really understand if you're making a decision as a company to conduct a double-blind placebo-controlled study, and it's going to cost, let's say $200,000. People want to know that you're likely going to be successful and get the substantiation you want. It's very hard to ask people to spend $200,000 if the result would be like, oh my God, this failed. So it's very hard for the business people to navigate this.
Yeah, Greg, for just overarching, I think the biggest concern I have is just with the approach of let's issue more rules, expand our authority, make things more complex, more challenging, as opposed to let's stick with the law that people have been following and understand. And if there are issues with violations of that law, let's go out and prosecute them. I mean, in the notice concerning this proposed rule, the FTC spends several pages discussing that there are marketers that are doing things that right now violate ROSCA and violate the telemarketing sales rule
Yeah.
and
Go
violate
after
Section 5 because they're unfair deceptive trade practices.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. If that's happening, use those laws to police that activity. You know, it's not the case that every time a law is enacted or a rule is enacted, there's something else that goes away. It was just piling on. If there's a problem, enforce the law that's there.
Great thought, Damon. Here's another one. With so many large corporations being affected by these potential negative option rulemaking changes, for example, think about subscription sales for a company like Netflix. How are companies of that size and scope reacting to the proposed changes?
I think several have already reacted because they've already faced consumer class actions. I mean, the larger corporations. I'm still shocked from time to time to see, you know, a name brand publicly traded company that's being sued, and it looks like from the face of the complaint that they made sort of a dumb mistake in complying with ROSCA or the California or Vermont, you know, auto renewal laws. Like the New York Times was sued in a case out of North Carolina several months ago. But I think they probably haven't gotten out in front of the proposed rule because that's not in effect yet. But I think most companies, that are name brands have already adapted to comply with the existing law. And Jennifer, do you agree?
Yeah, I mean, well, most large companies also have, you know, legal departments that can be quite substantial, and, you know, they're up on this and they're probably already advising their marketing department to, you know, look at the buy flow and see how you might want to revise this, and they're probably engaging in, you know, various testing to see what buy flow would impact conversion the most. But it's the, you know, as I said earlier, it's the companies that don't have those resources that are really going to be hit hard by all these changes, especially privacy. You have to, I'm sure Linda and Damon can talk to this, you know, data mapping for a company is heavy lifting, especially if you have a large company and you don't know what this department collects data, but you didn't know they collected this. And it's hard, especially when there are more and more privacy laws every time you turn around.
It's kind of funny that on the one hand, the FTC is saying, if you get too large, we're going to pursue you for antitrust law violations. But on the other hand, we're not going to help startup businesses because we're going to make it so expensive, so many barriers to entry for you to actually build a footing and run your business.
Makes sense. Well, guys, I'm going to rejoin you here. We're just about out of time. And we want to say thank you to everybody. Thank you, Jennifer, Linda, Damon, and Greg. Really interesting stuff. Well done, well orchestrated. A lot to think about, a lot to chew on for everybody. And we look forward to not only having the folks who attended here today think about those things, but also all those folks who will eventually watch us on our YouTube channel do the same. So thank you to our speakers in the PDMI E-Commerce and Government Affairs Councils for bringing us today's event. If you are a PDMI member and would like to get involved, you can reach out to me directly to share your interest in any of our 7 member councils today. Your next opportunity to attend a PDMI event live online is our next edition of Take 20, our bi-monthly webinar series created by the Brand Response Council. Tomorrow, August 23rd at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific, members of the Brand Response Council will discuss a big question. What is direct response if everything is direct response? To register for the webinar, please visit thepdmi.com/take-20. Also, online registration continues for PDMI West, October 9th through 11th in San Diego, with 10 planned educational sessions, 4 special networking events, and more. PDMI West promises to be the performance marketers that must-attend event of the fall. We're also closing in on a key deadline for those planning to attend. Availability in the PDMI's on-site discounted hotel room block at Intercontinental San Diego will expire in less than 3 weeks on September 11th. Badge holders can book their hotel rooms now. Don't miss out. Visit thepdmi.com/PDMI-West to grab your badge and begin the process of locking down your room today. That's it for this edition of our Summer Seminar Series. Thank you again for joining us. Be well. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.